Hello, fellow horror fiends, and welcome to The Horror Within Me, a podcast dedicated to the world of horror. Join us each week as our host explores a new, horrifying topic from the many realms of horror, such as film, television, and more, and returns to tell us his terrifying revelations. So sit back, relax, and get ready to face the horrors within.
Hi, and welcome back to another Spooky Sunday episode of The Horror Within Me. I am your host, Eric, and this week I am joined by my friend Lizzie. Hi, Lizzie.
Hi! I'm so excited to be here.
I'm very excited. This week we decided, because me and Lizzie had a conversation where I was at her house about a month ago, thinking of episodes for October because it's spooky season, and Lizzie suggested the Haunting of Hill House series, and I thought that what perfect fucking Netflix series.
It was
It's
amazing.
spooky season.
Yeah.
It's one of your favorites, right?
Yeah, it's definitely one of my favorites. I love the just the feel of it, the cinematography, the acting, and just the idea of making of course I have a car alarm going off. I hope you can't hear that.
No, who cares? Everyone knows what it's like to live out in the world.
Yeah. But yeah, I just loved like the feel of the episode, and I loved horror being stretched out over more than just an hour or two. So the
Yes.
fact that it was 10 episodes and you could like binge it or you could save it throughout the month, I just thought that was amazing.
Yes, and don't worry about the car alarm. So this podcast, we are all about authenticity. We don't try too hard. We just have fun. We're horror fans, and people listening are horror fans, and we just like to talk and invite people in to join the conversation. So I don't know if since it's your first time on the show, so welcome. I'm very excited.
Thank you.
We've been doing a lot of stuff over here, so it's super fun and inviting guests and doing things like that. So a couple things about the show is usually we just pick a topic, or I pick a topic. I always say we. There's not really anyone but me. But I say we because I think of the horror community, and I have a lot of people that I talk to, like you, who give suggestions. So we pick a topic. We do what's called terrifying trivia, which sometimes relates to the content of the episode. Sometimes it's just another piece of the horror media. We may sometimes do a little horror news that we've read throughout the week or so. And also we do our very own unique rating system and give the episode or the topic a rating. So that's pretty much what we'll be doing today's episode. And just discussing why we love The Haunting of Hill House, why if anyone in the world hasn't seen it yet. It came out in 2018, so I don't know how you haven't.
Years.
But if you haven't seen it, we're going to convince you to watch it, and watch it in 2 days. I'm going to give you 2. I'm not going to give you more than 2 days. Sound good?
Yeah, absolutely. You could totally binge it in 2 days.
Yes. I mean, I have to admit, I haven't seen it since it came out. So I'm going off of memory and recaps that I've been doing to prepare for the episode. So you've recently watched it.
Yeah, so I watched it when it first came out in 2018. It took a lot of begging and prodding to get my partner to watch it, and he finally relented. And then I ended up falling asleep during it back in 2018 when it came out, and he binged the last 5 episodes without me throughout the night.
Oh, no.
So
you
I
guys
had to
broke
make
up
him
now, right?
rewatch
You're not
it.
together, right?
No, we are.
I know, I'm kidding. That's an
Don't know
offense.
how that happened. But then they made a follow-up, The Haunting of Bly Manor. And so before that came out, it was a completely different storyline, a completely different house that it was based off of. But I still made him rewatch the entire Haunting of Hill House series. And then, yes, I recently watched it this year because it's almost Halloween. So I had to get ready, you know.
Yes, exactly. And it's so well done and so different than, I think that's what made it so popular, is that it was very different than what we were used to seeing in horror recently.
Yes. Yeah. I love how up until I think it's like the last 2 episodes, you have all of the pieces and you just don't know how they fit together yet. And then just the flashing the back and the forth and the back and the forth. And I just think it makes it just an awesome storyline to watch it piece itself together slowly. And I think it makes you as a viewer just become more engaged as the series goes on. And I will say, if you've only watched it once so far and you go back and rewatch it, there's so many more things that you pick up on that make sense after you watch the last two episodes that you didn't even realize you noticed the first time around that ended up being important in the end. So
Yeah,
I think that makes it amazing.
it I agree, and I do wanna watch it again, and it's funny that you brought that up about the timelines, the 2 different timelines, because that's not always done successfully
Oh, I agree.
in movies and television shows.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's
Mhm.
just not well done, and I think that Mike Flanagan did an amazing job balancing between the 2
Mhm.
timelines to make it make sense and connecting it all together at the end. I thought it was beautifully done. So, great job to him.
Yeah, and I also love how he bounces between the 2 timelines, but also between the timelines within each character.
Mhm.
So sometimes you're seeing something from, um, let's say, Shirley's perspective, and then a few episodes later, you're seeing it from Theo's perspective, and at the maybe at the moment, you don't even know that they're paralleling each other, but in the end, they combine back towards each other. I'm thinking specifically of the red door, when
Yes.
Shirley's trying to unlock it and Theo's on the other side dancing, and she just hears this haunting banging, and Shirley's just like, "Why can't I open the door?" And you don't even realize when you're watching them that they're paralleling each other until the end. You're like, "Oh my gosh, those were happening at the same time." And I think it's so great how he's able to combine those two aspects of the jumping between timelines and the jumping between specific characters' timelines.
Yes, and I'm gonna do a quick synopsis. I'm gonna read off of Wikipedia in case there's anyone out
Oh
there who
yeah,
doesn't know what the hell we're talking about here.
that's true.
I'm gonna pull my phone up. I do this sometimes. I'll do a synopsis. So, let's see what it says. This is Wikipedia, so don't hold me accountable, people. It says in the summer of 1992, Hugh and Olivia Crane and their 5 children, Stephen, Shirley, Theodora, Luke, and Eleanor, move into Hill House to renovate the mansion in order to sell it and build their own house designed by Olivia. However, due to unexpected repairs, they have to stay longer and they begin to experience increasing paranormal phenomena, resulting in a tragic loss and the family fleeing from the house. 26 years later, the Crane siblings and their estranged father reunite after another tragedy strikes them, and they are forced to confront how their time in Hill House has affected each of them. So that's a synopsis. And to those listening, if you haven't seen it, spoiler alerts ahead because we are dissecting the entire series. So we're going to be talking about stuff that are spoilers. So if you haven't seen it, stop listening now, go watch it, and then come back and talk to
I've
us.
already given some, but it's fine.
It's not, yeah, you haven't done too much. So that's that. But I think and it was based off of the Shirley Jackson book
Mhm.
in the 50s. And
So I
I
have the
didn't
book.
Oh, you did? Did you read it?
I didn't read it yet. I got it to go on vacation, and I ended up reading a different book, which also is a horror book. We could talk about it another time if you're on
Always.
a horror books binge. But so I haven't read it yet, but I did get the book, and my plan is to read it this October. I will say though, from what I've read, it does diverge. Like the show is a little bit different than the book. It's not like
Yeah.
a an
It's like loosely
exact.
based, I heard.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't know that there was like other adaptations of the book in other media, like
Oh, I didn't
the
know that.
movie The Haunting
Okay.
with Catherine Zeta-Jones is loosely
Mhm.
based off of that too.
Wow.
Yeah.
I do know the first paragraph or the first page of the book is the exact opening narration of the series.
Oh
So
wow.
it does like touch back to the book in its very beginning stages.
Yeah. And the
Um,
character Shirley is named after the author.
after the author, yeah.
So that's so cool for those
Hmm.
of you who didn't know that. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But before we move forward, I'd like to do this thing. It's called terrifying trivia. And
Okay.
it, like I said in the beginning, it's just going to be a thing. And then at the end of the episode is when I give the answer, but you're more than welcome to take a guess at it. So before we continue,
Ooh,
it is
okay.
time for another terrifying trivia question. This week's terrifying trivia question is not related to Hill House. I've had a lot of trouble trying to find one, but it's something kind of similar. And the question is, based on a book written by Jay Anson, what 2005 supernatural remake stars Ryan Reynolds and Melissa George? And that is
Ooh.
this week's terrifying trivia question. Stick around to the end of the episode to find out the answer. So, That's the one I picked for this week. But
Yeah.
moving back, moving back to Hill House and all of that. I like I said, I didn't rewatch it, so I did readings, and
Mhm.
then since it's fresh, I would like to see how our perspectives are different and what
Yeah.
we remember. I'm gonna try to pull some memory, but I needed a recap. um, I forgot about first of all Mike Flanagan using the same people in all of his stuff.
I love when people I love, like, American Horror Story. I
Yes,
love, like,
like
uh
all those anthologies.
yeah, yeah, like, where they're able to use the same characters, and it makes it even more special when you see it the next season and you see, what's her name? Victoria. I forget her last name. I'm so
Yes,
bad with names. When she
yeah, I'm
pops
terrible.
up and the
Yep,
actress who plays Theodora, and I'm pretty sure Mike Flanagan also directed, Hush. Have you seen
he did
that?
Hush and
Yeah, and
Oculus.
he uses the same actress.
They're married.
I did not know that.
Yes, the actress that plays Theodora and Mike Flanagan are married in real life.
Oh, I love that. That's
Yeah, so it's
amazing.
kind of also like a Rob and Sherry Moon Zombie
Yeah, yeah,
situation.
yeah.
So, yeah, I
Um,
thought it was cool. She's amazing though.
I love her. She's such a
Kate
badass.
Siegel, her
Yeah.
name. Such a good actress.
Mhm.
But yeah, I didn't realize even watching the recaps because I watched his other show, Midnight Mass,
Mhm.
and a
That's
lot of
on
the
my
same
list.
characters were in Hill House, like
Mhm.
the Dudleys and Theodora,
Mhm.
just a lot of the same thing. So I thought that was really interesting and cool because the first piece of work I saw of his, I didn't even realize was Hush and Oculus.
I don't remember if I saw Oculus, but I for sure saw Hush. When I was in my first years of college, I did a degree in American Sign Language. And so I am always curious to see how people are able to adapt the deaf community into um, the world of cinema and whether they do it justice or not. And so the whole movie itself interested me, but I just think the plot itself, I think, was really interesting. It's like Strangers.
Yes.
That movie always terrified me when I was younger. So that kind of
Yes, me
plot
too.
where it's like people trying to break into
Home
the safety
Invasion,
of your own home is just so terrifying to me, especially
which we're
also
doing a
the
future episode on in November for Home Invasion movies.
you are?
So,
Oh my gosh,
yeah,
I'm gonna favorite it. Don't worry.
yes.
Um, but yeah, so I think like that concept is always so terrifying to me, especially being like also a true crime junkie at the same time. I think it's its own level of horror to think of like
Yes.
this is like top tier realistic happens every day.
Yes.
So that makes
There's
it all the more terrifying.
there's something about, horror that can be brought into real life. You know
Mhm,
what I mean? And I like you said, the true crime part and like home invasions is like the top of the list. But like supernatural and Hill House and ghosts and stuff may seem wild to some people, but I think it could also be in the category of this could happen. People believe that this happens.
oh
I believe
yeah,
in
and
supernatural.
I think even just setting I don't think you even have to believe in the paranormal to be terrified about the themes that are happening in Hill House because even if you set aside, okay, they don't really see ghosts, maybe that's your perspective. Well, then you have to juggle with the fact that then this is mental illness and that can also cause crazy and I crazy is probably not the correct word to use there, but it can also
I
cause
know.
these super heartbreaking scenarios that happen
Hmm.
throughout Hill House.
Yeah, and
Um,
that's great with the like you said, the topic of other things like mental illness, which is another thing I like to do on this podcast is really go beyond the entertainment aspect
mhm,
of materials and really dive deeper into themes that are held within it. Like you said, mental illness, suicide. And I know that in today's world, and I mentioned this I think last week on my other episode or a couple weeks ago, where people aren't saying suicide anymore. Like if you're on TikTok, it's unalive yourself, and they
mhm.
they they, they shut you down and they black it out. And I think we've gotten to this point where we're sheltering it because of triggers, but I think it's a very real thing. And saying the word suicide maybe hiding people from it isn't the best coping mechanism.
I think I think in terms of TikTok, a lot of it has to do with the words getting banned.
Yeah.
or your video getting banned. I do know that a lot of times today people will say they completed suicide or they attempted suicide instead of they committed suicide to kind of take the stigma away of like um,
It
that it's a
being
crime,
negative.
you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you say you committed a crime, you say you committed suicide, so I do know that a lot of people are transitioning to using the word completed suicide, but it is such a harsh and heartbreaking thing to think of when people, find themselves in such a dark place that they think that's the only out,
Yeah.
um, and the interesting thing about Hill House is the way they portray it. You don't see it as someone being like, the typical, I've lost all my money. I'm never, what am I going to do? It's these things where there's all these other aspects at play that cause them to get to that point where they've, killed themselves. And whether that's from the ghosts doing it or what they perceive to be the ghosts, that's truly the theme that's going throughout the entire series.
Yeah, I agree. And I want to touch on a topic that we have to address during this episode for the fans of the show, which is the bent neck lady.
Oh my gosh.
Terrifying, first of all. And I
Terrifying.
did not put it together ever.
Until that episode, I think it was like episode 5 or 6, it did not dawn on me at all.
Yeah. And we're horror fans. We watch a lot of horror
Yeah.
media. And I'm curious for anyone who's listening, get on the Facebook page or join the group and let me know because I'm so curious. Did anyone really, and don't lie, like, did anyone really figure it out?
The only time it crossed my mind was because they would show some terrifying silhouettes of her neck, like her head completely off to the side with the neck jutting
Oh my
out.
God,
And
yeah.
one of the thoughts that crossed my mind, of course, was someone like hanging themselves. But I thought it was the mom because of those beautiful dresses she would wear. And
Mm,
it briefly crossed my mind. And then I was like, I don't think so. um, because I didn't foresee the mom taking, because you saw her when she was running away from Steve and she had the broken ankle and everything. I thought it was more of like a vicious end that she came to, which, spoiler alert,
kind
it
of.
was a
Yeah.
truly horrifying end. But yeah, for a brief second it crossed my mind. I never thought it was going to be Nellie at all.
No,
Yeah,
no.
which
And,
is
and,
all the more terrifying to think your own demons have been haunting you like your entire life.
And that goes back to what you said earlier about the timelines. And it's not even just that they were not even just telling stories from two different timelines. The timelines were ingrained in each other.
Mhm.
And it was like the one episode where the mom walks through the door and she's in the daughter's morgue
Yes,
with
yes.
Nellie on the table.
And it's so interesting to me because that's one of the things that drove her to go down this rabbit hole of saving them and waking them up and keeping them young forever, because she didn't want the world to get out and make them into, someone. Luke was an addict and Nellie ultimately completed suicide, and she didn't want the twins to get to that kind of space. But her going down that rabbit hole is what leads them to that. So it's kind of like this truly like tautological, like circular thing that she's doing where she sees this, she wants to stop it, but her trying to stop it is what leads to them being like that. And I think that's truly um one of
Beautifully
the
done.
issues with seeing the future, like
Yeah, it was terrifying. And I I just think that the poisoning thing and that little girl, what's her name, Annabelle?
Annabelle, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, she was supposed to be imaginary, but the whole time she was the Dudley's
Yeah.
kid. Spoiler alert,
Oh.
but
So heartbreaking.
it was just everything about it. And I think what do we have, like, several deaths in that show. We have Nell, we have the mom, we have little Annabelle, we had the dad,
Nell the mom, Annabelle the dad. Um,
and at this point, both of the parents had committed suicide
yeah, and if you think back of it, at one
or
point
have
you see Luke,
completed suicide. If you,
right? You have Luke. He's ultimately revived, but he overdoses at one point.
yeah,
Um,
which is another topic that is very tough in the community is addiction
right,
and
right.
awareness and compassion for addicts.
Yeah. I do love
because
how they portray Luke, how is the best way to describe it? Like, they truly portray him as battling the demons. They don't
mhm,
show him as just the, because I believe in the book he wasn't an addict, he was just known as, like, a liar and a thief, and here they
okay,
show, well, there was a reason behind his lying and a thief, something bigger had a hold on him that he, was truly struggling with.
nice.
Um, and the bowler hat guy or whatever you wanna call him, he
Oh god,
was
yeah.
so terrifying, so I
The
understand.
scene when he is floating around and lifts up the bed and looks
Oh,
under,
yes.
my heart stopped.
Mhm.
Like, it was there was a lot of terrifying shots in that
Yeah.
entire series. Just very, very, unnerving, like the funeral home
There's
scenes with
so
Nell.
much buildup and, anticipation into the jump scares, and I kinda love how they were able to do that because I think sometimes movies or series have jump scares just for the sake of jump scares. This not only played into the plot, but it truly had so much anticipation and build that you knew a jump scare was coming, but you just didn't know when. Scared me so many times. The first time watching through.
The jump scare, speaking of jump scares, the biggest jump scare of the series was when Theo and Shirley are driving to the
Yes.
house
Yes.
and Nell's ghost, pops up into the backseat screaming or whatever.
Yeah.
Scared the shit out of me.
Because,
But I
they're arguing thinking that, spoiler alert, that
yeah,
Shirley's husband and Theo were having some bit of an affair. Um, but in actuality, Theo's trying to explain to her, because Theo has that strange capability where she can touch something and feel something, and so when she touched
yeah,
Nell, she felt nothing, so she said she was just trying to feel something, and he
mhm,
was drunk and she grabbed onto Shirley's husband. That's when Shirley walks in. So Theo and Shirley are trying to, they're truly arguing about that while they're going to save Luke from this house. And Nellie, kind of from her grave, at least from my
yeah,
perspective, is jumping forward and it's like, pay attention, like, keep
yes.
going.
And I
Um,
read that was it was planned, but also not planned. They did it to make it more authentic. So what they did was there was still supposed to be a few more lines between the two actresses, but the actress that plays Nell was secretly told to jump in early to
yeah,
get a really good effect. So they weren't
yeah,
even
I love
anticipating. So
that.
their reaction was very like real. So I thought
Right.
that was super cool. And like
Yeah.
things like that, like you even when you're acting, the director's still trying to find ways to make it as authentic as possible. He's like,
Yes.
they know
I
it's coming. So what if we do it a little early?
I think that's what makes good horror too, is like a little bit of authenticity behind it because I mean, look at Jamie Lee Curtis, like
Mm,
amazing screamer, right? Anyone can, well, I shouldn't say anyone, but you can find a good actress to get up and scream and look horrified, but having that little bit of authenticity behind it, I think truly makes it um, believable.
relatable.
Yeah,
Yes.
relatable. Yeah, exactly.
Same. Yeah, I agree. And it's just that the other thing, like I said, that was just unnerving to me was the funeral home. It was always something that was just
Yeah.
strange to me. And I think the first time that all of them are together again, and the theme of I think I've read that each child represents a stage of grief
Hmm.
was so interesting to me because we've all many people, especially many people in the horror community, have been through traumas and
Hmm.
losses, and we escape through these worlds, and including myself. So you start after you realize that they each represent a stage of grief, you start to relate to each one during each stage.
Right.
So like Stephen, I believe, was denial.
Hmm.
um Theo was bargaining, Shirley was anger, and Nell was acceptance, and then Luke, I can't remember what the other stage is, but it's
Bargaining, denial. Oh, that's a good
I have it written down,
question.
but I'm going to try and be a good person here and remember off the top of my head, but I'm too old to do that now.
I'm gonna look up the stages of grief. Let's
Let's
see
see.
here.
Let's see. We have Luke. I'm going to look at my notes here. Oh, depression. Okay,
Depression.
that's
Yeah,
smart. Yeah. All right. The one that nobody wants to talk about,
I know.
which is very, very relatable to back to addiction. Most people
Yeah.
don't realize that nobody that's happy and healthy just picks up a needle and puts it in their arm. That's not how addiction
Oh,
starts.
100%.
In my opinion, there's always some underlying mental health issues.
Mhm.
So But I thought so that was well done on their writing part because I don't, like you said, he wasn't an addict in the book.
I don't believe so. Like I said, I didn't read all of the book, but from my understanding, he was just known as being like the like sly, like sneaky brother. Um, People can absolutely correct me if I'm wrong. But I didn't read the book yet. That's my full disclosure.
Yes. So why did you initially watch Hill House? Do you remember? I know that as a horror fan, but what drew you to Hill House?
I mean, 100% it was because it popped up on my next Netflix queue and was like, "Hey, you're gonna like this." And I just saw the poster, or the thumbnail, or how,
Hmm.
whatever you want to call it, and that was like, "Oh yeah, I'm 100% gonna like that." And then I think saw whatever preview trailer was playing on Netflix, and my partner and I can never agree on what to watch. So usually horror is the go-to for us because it's the one genre that we can at least both sit through.
Okay.
He hates my rom-coms, I hate his action films, so,
Oh, yeah.
um
Horror has a little bit of all of it.
yeah, exactly. So we usually put on horror or comedy, and yeah, I think it was came out in October around
Hmm.
Halloween, so we're always looking for horror stuff or in the fall, in the spooky season,
Spooky
and,
season.
that, if I'm gonna be 100% honest, is why it came up, and then once I watched the first episode, I was just enthralled. I had to watch it all. Um, and then now I'm constantly refreshing, like, season 3,
Yes.
because season 2 I also loved. Um,
I liked Blind Manor. I thought it was a lot more less horror in my opinion.
100%. It is more of a love story, and it does have some paranormal aspects to it. It is less, I think less gruesome.
Yeah.
Not that you see a lot of blood and gore in Hill House, but you see a lot of scenes that if you got an up close view, it would be blood and gory.
Hmm.
I think it also it's a little bit lighter. You don't have the 5 stages of grief, and um you do have unique situations though that I think affect everyday people, and you do have that aspect of mental illness without giving any spoilers away on that one. But I
Hmm.
do recommend Bly Manor, but I
Yes.
will say it's not Hill House.
Yeah, and I think that people should understand that because you love Hill House and there's other things that are done. I don't know about me as a horror fan. I don't want to keep watching the same shit.
Yes. Yes.
I like different takes on different things. Like people are upset about, like for instance, everyone knows. You can see behind me. I love Halloween, like the movie
Yes.
franchise, and it's my all-time favorite. I have them on my shirt now. Like it's just my favorite. And Halloween Ends comes out in a couple weeks. I already bought my tickets. I'm very excited. But I like that there's also different timelines in
Mhm.
Halloween films, and that there's different takes on it. And people are like, "Oh, this is stupid," or "Why do they keep bringing it back?" But at least when people are bringing it back, they're trying to do something fresh.
Something
No
new.
matter what, when we go into Halloween Ends, whether people love it or hate it, you shouldn't go in thinking like you don't want to keep watching the original movie over and over again because what's the point? You want to keep seeing the same thing? I want to
Right.
see it different ideas and perspectives. So
Hot
with Bly
take.
Manor,
I
yeah.
was gonna say hot take. I know some people get so upset when they take originals and they remake them, or they make them with female characters compared to male or whatever. But I personally love when they change it up a little bit and do that new spin, so you don't feel like you're watching the same thing back to back. If I want to watch the original Ghostbusters and then the female Ghostbusters, I don't feel like I'm watching the exact same movie word for word. I know that's a hot take, and a lot of people who have their cult followings of these movies don't agree, but that's how I
I think that's yeah, and I think it's important that, especially when we have a platform like using to put this out to the world. Like anyone can listen to this podcast
feel.
once it goes live. And I think if we're going to create content and create conversations, we shouldn't shy away from the hot take. I'm not
Right.
here to make content for people to love me. You either
Yeah.
love me or you don't. You either like my podcast or you don't. And you know me well enough that I don't do shit for anybody but myself. And I don't
Not
mean that in a
that right.
selfish way. I mean it in a way of I'm a horror fan at heart. I've reconnected with that, and that's why I'm doing this. And other people will either jump on board and support and like it and start a conversation because that's what this is about: is to have conversations with fellow horror fans or people in the community and just have fun. If you
But
don't have to like us.
I think that circles back though to the idea of authenticity and like people know when you're not being authentic and if you're going to have a true opinion. I'd rather you have your true opinion and it completely differ than try to cater to what you think, I would like or wouldn't.
Exactly, because then there's so many podcasts I've listened to different things, and it just sounds forced
Mhm.
and rehearsed. I
Mhm.
don't do rehearsing. I don't know if it's because I can talk. Me first of all, when we first met, we knew that we were going to hit it off because we met through my husband,
It was
and
perfect.
we both can talk and talk and talk
Well,
and
your
talk.
husband and I became besties the first night we met. And from there, when you got introduced, I don't think there was a dull moment at that party.
No, no, and it hasn't been since, and it's been
Right.
5 years.
Gosh, has it really been that long?
Yeah, me and him met in October,
And
even
you
though
came, I think, to like a Christmas
Christmas.
party or something, right?
It was a
That's when
Christmas
we
party,
met.
yeah.
So,
Hmm.
yeah. And then I knew
Yeah.
about what was going to happen on Christmas Day.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, he came
Um,
over late at night too, Christmas
yeah.
Day. It was fun. But he's not a big horror fan, but he's slowly coming around.
I think
He
you changed
likes
him a little bit.
I definitely did. He loved Hill House.
Yeah.
He was a huge fan and it sucked him in. There's a lot of things that he says he doesn't like anymore, but he does. But that's just me teasing him. Our anniversary is October 2nd. So this is obviously airing after that, but it is amazing, which October 2nd is our 1 year wedding anniversary, which is also
Yes.
this is a this is airing a week after that. So by at this point, all of our previous people that have listened to my first ever celebrity interview with Amelia Kincaid from Night of the Demons, which was another dream come true
Right.
because I grew up loving this movie and this cult classic that if you either know it or you don't, and that's what I mean. Like I'm not trying to send content out for people just
Mhm.
try to make followers or fans or whatever the case is. I'm doing things that are fun for me and sharing it with the world and hoping for the best, you know. But this is the second episode in October and another interview or collaboration episode, which is so fun for me because it's Halloween and spooky season. So let's like recommend all the stuff that we can
Yes.
recommend and tell everyone to watch. And I watched Hocus Pocus 2 yesterday.
Don't spoil it. We're watching it tonight.
Okay. And I watched The Munsters, Rob Zombie's The Munsters the day before.
Mhm.
And both, lack of a better term, children's
Mhm.
themed. But I love all different Halloween shit.
I love I will get on the Tim Burton train anytime. I
Yeah.
love all those kid cult classics. I make my
Hmm.
nephew come over and watch them with me in October because I don't have any children. And so we watch Corpse Bride, Frankenweenie, Nightmare Before Christmas. Like we do it all because there's something so nostalgic about it, about back when Halloween was, you were just waiting for that one day to get all the candy and dress up and,
Yes.
and pretend to be someone else.
And all the spooky stuff on TV and the
And all the spooky
decorations and the
stuff. Yeah.
smells.
Yes. So there's something so, so, so nostalgic about it. But two, I think it's just a good little prequel to get into the super scary stuff.
I agree. Yes. And it's a nice break off. Like you said, the
Mhm.
nostalgia purposes, I think nostalgia is so powerful.
Yeah.
And
And I think some people get like bogged down in like, oh, I don't like blood or I don't like ghosts or I don't. And I think within the horror genre, there's so many different subgenres. And just looking at Hill House compared to Bly Manor, if you want something that is less spooky scary, absolutely. Like Bly Manor is for you. And then if you want something that's a little more like, ooh, I might want to turn the lights on. Hill House is for you. So I think just within the horror genre, there's so many subgenres that make it so exciting to be a part of. So I hate when people say, oh, I don't like scary movies. It's like, you just haven't found your subgenre of scary movies yet. Maybe your genre is hocus pocus. Um, you know,
I agree. Yeah,
right?
that's perfectly said, and I say that all the time. Is that people that another thing in the horror community that is infamous, which is a kind of like what people don't talk about, is how harsh fans can be, and
Mm,
if
hmm.
if you don't agree, I can say things like this, like me having a conversation about how much I love Hill House, I'm opening myself up to be attacked by people that are saying, "Oh, that's trash. How could you like this?" Because it's
Yeah.
not their subgenre of horror.
Right.
But that doesn't mean anything. Same thing with like video games. People aren't real gamers if they play like The Sims or something. Like there's so many ways to be a part of communities, and
Right.
the world is so fucked up. Let people find their communities and their sub communities and have fun and do whatever the hell they like, right?
Yeah,
Who cares?
exactly. So I
I love all
completely
the
agree.
subgenres of horror.
I was gonna say this podcast is a first perfect example though of how you can go from Michael Myers to Hill House to we've literally brought up Hocus Pocus and The Nightmare Before Christmas in this episode.
Yes.
So
Yes, it's for everything. I mean, the language isn't for everybody. I mean, but
I
it
can
is what
agree
it
with
is.
that.
So I'm gonna say it's time to do the rating system.
Oh,
So the
yes.
rating system, like I said, is unique to my show. It's I like to give ratings, but I like to pick a something relatable to the content that's going to be a rating system. So for Haunting of Hill House, I thought it'd be super cool to do skeleton keys because old spooky mansion and the key that didn't work in the
Mhm.
red door and all that. So for me personally, my rating for the Haunting of Hill House, which is not something I do often, but I give it a 10 out of 10 skeleton keys.
I am going to
And
have to agree, actually. I thought I was going to be dramatic in saying that, but I'm glad we're on the same page. I just think it's different than the
mhm,
normal horror and paranormal shows that you expect. I think it's, as we talked about today, like the, the ideas of like the different themes of the stages of grief and mental illness and the real world issues that go into it. But I also love, I think one of the things that truly makes it 10 keys for me is there are so many times the first time watching through that I was picking my jaw up off the floor that weren't just the last episode, where things
oh
started to
yeah,
click. Like I think we find out about Nell being the bent neck lady like halfway through the season, and you're like, oh, I thought this was gonna be like an episode 10 reveal. Um,
yes,
but truly I feel like the last like two episodes, you're like, I think my jaw was so sore from being
yeah,
on the floor the entire time.
yeah. It's not a slow burn.
It's not, it's not. There are slow
It's
burn parts,
yeah,
but in the end, you realize that those slow burn parts were so critical to the overall outcome that they're well worth it.
yeah.
But
I
yeah,
agree.
I think it's so
Did
well
you
done.
know that there were over 50 hidden ghosts throughout the series?
I didn't know that. The one that really got me the first time through when I watched it was the clock repairman. Because you
Yeah,
see him a few times and you're like, oh shoot, he just looked like a normal person, like on it. So
there's like a whole YouTube video pointing out all the
all the
different ghosts that
ghosts.
you miss. I
Oh,
can't remember who it was that did the video, so I apologize for not giving credit, but check it, look it up on YouTube. It's
I'm gonna
so
look
interesting.
that
And
up.
you're like, there's like a face in under the stairs when somebody's walking by, like little things like that that you don't notice that are like
Yeah.
throughout the entire series. And I'm like, things like that, like the details, I think are why I give it a 10 out of 10 because it's original, but it's also timeless. I don't feel like this show in 10 years.
100%. I agree with that. Yeah. Because even when you're watching it, there's times where you forget they're in the 90s, in the flashback time period where they could be in the 80s and the 70s. If you think of the fact that maybe they didn't have like a PlayStation 5 sitting on there, I feel like even in 10 years you could be like, "Oh, that's the 2000s or whatever."
Mhm.
Or the 2010. So, I think that's great. I also love just the nuances in each episode and the color contrast. But thinking back to when you were talking about the funeral home scene, how they were able to, it was just one continuous scene.
Shot.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's just one continuous shot bouncing from character to character, like never once having like the transition of like cut and then go here, cut and then go there. And I think that was, I mean, unless you're watching a play, that's not something you typically get to see. And I loved
Mhm.
the idea of those actors, having to play it all the way through and knowing that like one little giggle meant you had to start the whole thing over again.
I know.
Um,
The actresses that played Theo, young and old,
mhm.
each kept diaries and
Really?
swapped them for young and old versions to kind of keep a consistent character arc and development between the two.
I
I
love
read that
that. That's,
too.
what's her name? Grace McKenna? She's so great.
Yes, yes.
She plays so many young actors, like, younger versions of actresses. I think she does such a great job. I
Yeah,
think
and the actress that played Nell also that was her first professional role that kicked her entire career.
yeah, she is
And she was amazing.
so adorable. Yeah. I mean, I think they all were, like, it was just truly, truly amazing. And there's so many people that you see in other things, like Shirley, she had a reoccurring role in Grey's Anatomy. So for all my
Did
Grey's
she?
people out there, yeah, she played, it would be hilarious if I was getting this totally wrong right now, but she played someone who I think a bridge or something, like, fell on her face and she was completely, like,
Oh, that was her?
yeah, and they had to, like, reconstruct her whole face, and then she
The
started
one that
dating
liked
Alec.
Karev?
Yes.
Oh my god,
I'm
that is
pretty sure,
her.
oh my god, that would be embarrassing if it wasn't, and I just
I'm
wasn't.
a huge Grey's Anatomy fan
Yeah,
too. I think it
I
just
know,
came
that's why
back
I
on
thought.
this week.
But yeah, so there's so many people
Yeah.
who pop up in other things.
Yeah, it's so nice to see.
Yeah.
So I'm glad we agree on the rating system. So that means that
Yeah, I
obviously,
thought for
if
real,
you're
I thought
listening,
you were gonna be like, "Oh, of course she's giving it 10 keys," but, I mean, I've watched it 3 times now, and all 3 times I've picked up new things that I didn't see the first time or 2, and I cannot recommend it enough.
yes, I have to watch it again. I just been watching other shit, and back then, I think it came out in 2018, and then all the events that happened from 19, 20, 21, 22 in my life and the world
Mhm.
was so crazy that I don't even know how we ended up at the end of 2022 here.
I know. It truly does give you a different perspective too at the different stages in your life that you are, because at one point I feel like you might identify with Theo and her anger and her, like, standoffishness, and then at one point you might be at the Steve stage where you're like, I just don't care anymore. Like, you do you, I'm gonna do me.
Yeah,
Or you might be the Nell who just wants to bring everyone together and have that family atmosphere. So I think even just watching it in different stages of life is different chapters of life or whatever they're calling it these days.
yeah. I don't know
Seasons
what
of your life.
I'm just gonna say I'm just turned 36 and I'm on, I guess I don't know this
You know, like
version
a day over
version
21.
36. Yay! No, but but it is time to answer the terrifying trivia question.
Ooh, I'm
Are you
so
ready?
curious about this because the only Ryan Reynolds thing that's popping into my mind is the one where he was, like, buried underground, and I can't even remember the name of it.
You're gonna laugh. So I'm gonna read the question again just
Okay.
to refresh. And the question is based on a book written by Jay Anson, what 2005 supernatural remake stars Ryan Reynolds and Melissa George? And the answer, you want to try one more time or
Ryan Reynolds in a horror, supernatural. I have no idea.
the Amityville Horror?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
the
like
most
I forgot it was him.
quintessential of the childhood horror movies.
The ultimate first horror movie, like the horror house.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Which almost is a link to Hill House in a way
Yeah.
because instead of the dad being driven to kill, the mom is.
Yeah.
Um, that's such a good tie-in, I love that. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I feel so crazy now.
I just thought it was interesting too because I was just like, I don't remember. I've seen the remake once or twice. You know what, I had a problem with the remake for the Amityville Horror, and this is just a little touch on before we wrap up the episode. Is I thought they showed too much when I watched it. Like there was a scene with like a ghost in the ceiling or something, but
Mhm.
like it lasted more than 3 seconds, and I'm like, I had too much time to understand what I was looking at.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I was a 90s baby. So
Yeah.
when I first started getting into horror, I was about Ryan Reynolds, Amityville Horror age. So I definitely saw the remake before I saw the original.
Okay.
So to me, I was so young when I first saw it, so I don't really remember what my first impressions were, but it definitely scared me.
Yeah, I mean, it was well done. The original scared me, but I was very young. I've seen a
Yeah,
lot. My mom was a horror freak, and
yeah.
I wish I had the opportunity to like connect with her as an
Dissect it
adult.
with her, yeah.
But yeah, I used to watch all the classics: Halloween, Jason, Freddy. I've say it every
Yeah,
episode
oh yeah.
probably, like about
Well,
my mom.
and
But
did you see it was like, not a remake, but like a sequel to Amityville Horror, and it had like Bella Thorne and
I didn't watch that.
the kid from Shameless in it, the redhead.
Was it good?
No.
There was no hesitation in your voice. You didn't even take a breath. You just no.
I mean, we watched it all the way through as a true horror fan does, but
Yes.
it was an interesting take. Like, Bella Thorne was like a teenager, and I think it was like her twin or her older brother or someone was like sick, and he was like on a ventilator. And they move into the house, and then she starts seeing him like wake up and move and like do all these like things that he shouldn't be able to do because he's in this coma. Um, it was an interesting take, but I will take the first two Amityvilles over it any day. It's definitely third on the list.
I wanted to buy that house so bad.
Yeah, I could see you buying that house
Yeah.
and
It was for
Ryan being like,
sale like
absolutely not.
years ago. It was for sale and obviously way more than I could ever afford. And also not in New Jersey. Like
Mhm.
it was like I think it's Connecticut. Um really drawing a blank
It's
here.
somewhere in the Northeast, I think.
Yeah.
Um,
But it was for sale and I definitely would have bought that shit.
Speaking of houses for sale, this is off track, but it's a Netflix series that's a little paranormally, so I feel like it's related. Um, Will Byers' house from season one of
Mhm.
Stranger Things is for sale.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Well, if you're listening, go buy the Will Byers house.
I think it's only like 300,000, which is probably steep for that house because it was
Probably.
a little tiny. But if you love the
Surprising
nostalgia of
that
it,
it's yeah,
yeah.
300,000 is nothing compared to what people spend on collector's shit.
Oh my God, where we live, 300,000 for a rancher would be a steal.
Yeah, and just, keep bars on your windows now. Just
Yeah.
but I had so much fun. I'm gonna wrap
This
up
was
this week's
amazing.
episode. I
Yes,
really, really wanna say thank you so much for joining me. It's always a pleasure to sit down and talk to you, regardless if we're recording or if we're just having, like, a Saturday night conversation. We
I
can
know
keep
this
going
felt
for
like
hours and hours and hours.
it felt like just us hanging out at a kitchen
Yep.
table. But I want to thank you for having me. I'm a day one listener, so this has been
Yay.
great.
Yes.
Um, and I think what you're doing for the horror community here is great, and I loved, loved, loved being a part of it.
Yes. So before I let you go, I'm gonna ask you one last question.
Absolutely.
What would be your aside from Hill House, what for our listeners is one movie in the Halloween season that you would recommend people watch? What's your favorite movie to watch?
Oh, um, if we're going for true scared to turn the light off at night, oh, that's such an interesting question. Oh gosh. I'm gonna have to go with the Conjuring universe.
Okay.
I think that one is truly scary and it's the spookiness of it. If you want to go for a realistic scary, I gotta go the home invasion universe and say strangers, but I think the original Conjuring scared the daylights out of me for days the first time I
Okay.
saw it. So that's going to be my recommendation. And there's so many different films within that universe that you could have a different is it James Wan, different James Wan
Yes, yes.
movie every Friday night throughout the month of October and tie it all together. So um,
Good.
yeah, I think that's going to be my recommendation. Or if
My
you have a child, watch
recommendation.
Coraline because that one is scary as a
Oh god, that's out of control. I've had don't god, I can't get away from Coraline.
kid.
It's been like a month and a half.
I
You gotta
love
ask my husband.
Coraline.
Like it just keeps popping up everywhere we go. Button eyes, Coraline. I don't understand it. I don't understand. Am I being haunted by Coraline?
Do I have to be worried about you getting button eyes?
I probably. Jesus. But that's it for this week's episode of The Horror Within Me. If you want more horror content, you can find us on our website, which has all the past episodes at thehorrorwithinme.com. I'm on TikTok at Horror Within Me Podcast, Instagram at Horror Within Me, Facebook at The Horror Within Me, and YouTube at The Horror Within Me, where we are starting to do videos and featuring some live video podcasts. So just go to the website, click on the links. You'll find us all. We have spooky shakers so that you can make some delicious drinks while you watch your favorite scary movies and that is really it. I'm horrible at promoting myself, but listen, rate, review, like, comment, do all the shit that you're supposed to do to let people know that you love us.
And
And
tell them happy
again,
anniversary in the comments.
happy anniversary. And I always end by saying stay safe, but more importantly, stay spooky.